Hello everyone, my name is Mahesh Narayanan. I'm one of the venture partners at Newchip Accelerator, and today we have an amazing guest, Mr. Sean O'Sullivan, who is the Managing General Partner at SOSV. Thank you for joining us at the Newchip Demo Week.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Sean is an engineer, an entrepreneur, an investor. He's created amazing companies like MapInfo and NetCentric. He's coined the term cloud computing many, many years ago before that was even a thing. He's also supported a range of businesses, humanitarian efforts, and educational endeavors like Khan Academy, Mathletes, and Coder Dojo. He's also famous for being one of the dragons in Dragon's Den in Ireland, which is their version of Shark Tank. So we'd love to hear more about his experience in many of the things he's done over an amazing career in the past 40 years and still moving forward at amazing opportunities. So thank you for joining us, Sean.
Thank you, Mahesh. It's great to chat today.
Excellent. So Sean, tell me about how you got started. I know your journey has been long, and I would love to hear, where you came from. I know you're born in New York, so let's start from there.
Yeah, sure.
How you became an entrepreneur.
Well, I was born in New York City, but I grew up in upstate New York, and in the farmlands and the foothills of the Catskill Mountains, the tiny town of Schoharie, about 1,000 people. And so we didn't have any computers. Actually, computers didn't really exist when I was born. But I started. Started programming on time-sharing computers when I was probably around 12 or 13. By dialing in on a 300 baud modem, and just because I had an interest in it, I'd been reading a lot. I used to read hundreds of books every year, and I was very fascinated with the idea of creation and engineering. And so like the Tom Swift series, even though it's like, it's just like 5th grade level books or whatever, but it is a really inspirational sort of series, just inventing a world, seeing a world that doesn't exist and creating it, helping create it, has always been something that really excites me about being an entrepreneur, as well as now in backing entrepreneurs. So when I went to university, I was 16 when I graduated high school, and I went to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and then I worked in industry while I was to pay my way through college, and I graduated, I think, around 21, and I started a company right out of university, and that was a company called MapInfo. And MapInfo was the first, software to ever create street maps on personal computers. So you type an address and you see that location. And not only did we create that software, but we also put together all the maps for most of the populated areas in the United States. And then over the succeeding decade or so, we did that kind of work for much of the rest of the world. And so if you look at, wherever you are in the world, a lot of that creation of those maps and that street mapping wasn't necessarily digitized by MapInfo, but we made it available to the public, and created the ability to, do what people do in their cars these days, navigate from one place to another. Or we were mostly selling the product for commercial applications. But we also were built into thousands of other applications. We built a programming language around it. You call it an API these days, but we had different programming languages that people would bundle the MapInfo product into Microsoft, like the Office series, and before it became Bing Maps and things like that. And then bundling it into Oracle and bundling it into, loads of hundreds of different vertical specialized applications and dispatching services and fire departments and corporate management systems and everything else. So we became the national, standard of different countries and for NATO, and, it became a couple $100 million revenue company. It went public in 1994. I left the board about, like a month before, or a couple of months before it went public. And I had actually left the operations as the CEO of the company, and president. I was president at various times and CEO at other times. And I left that about a year and a half or so before I think it went public. And that was a great experience, having that especially be a first startup, and going that kind of distance with that. It was a tremendous experience. That was back in the early 90s. So it was even before the internet existed. So now when people think of street maps, they think of, Google Maps, for example, and other commercial, or not commercial, but consumer mapping products. And we were ahead of that day. But even today, MapInfo is used by hundreds of the Fortune 500 for all sorts of applications, and all around the world. So that was the first startup that I did, and it was really very formative experience for me.
And I know you also had a background in movie production, because I know you also had a degree, on that. How did that happen, and how does that kind of relate to your entrepreneurial journey, if it does, or what was the connection there?
Well, actually, one of the great things about entrepreneurs is they sort of suck you into this reality distortion field of how the whole world is going to revolve around their creation. And sometimes it actually happens, and it really does change the world. And so that is about great storytelling, right? And so I actually, as I sort of said earlier, like I was really fascinated with reading a lot, right? And so I read, I set school records, like 530 books in a single school year. It's about 3 books a school day, sort of, that I would read. And so I was thinking I was going to be an author, and so one way, and I loved movies and entrepreneurship. A lot of that is about telling the story in a way a customer or an investor or a journalist can write about it, and if you can communicate well about your vision, the change vision, the difference in what exists today versus what the world should be like, then eventually maybe the world will actually get to that place. And a couple of times, it has, like with maps, street maps on computers, and with cloud computing. Those are 2 areas that I am associated with, in being a pioneer. So that is the attraction to filmmaking, was because I've always loved great storytelling. And at a point also, I should say, when it looked like there was a period of time in there when the internet got really boring. I have to say, it never was really that bad, but there was a couple of years where it got really bad. The .bomb crisis. I had a company that I was running that had like, it was after MapInfo, that grew to like 8 million in revenue or something, but it was like 10 million or 11 million in expenses. And so that doesn't work in the .bomb sort of crush of no capital is available. So despite it being possibly, you look at a company like that today and say, oh, that probably would be worth a lot of money. We were lucky to sell the company for anything, and keep people employed, as we moved that out. So I lost millions of dollars personally on that. And also, there was a time in there with the internet, Microsoft came in with their Internet Explorer and was sort of drowning out competition and everything else. And so it just sort of got a little bit boring. I think the cloud computing, which took a few more years to develop, really opened things up again. And that, and of course the bandwidth expanding and all these applications being enabled because of the increased bandwidth made the internet much more exciting a few years after that. So I said, okay, well, let's try my hand in something else, So I tried music and I tried filmmaking, and I did a few things, which were for fun. I mean, it didn't change the world. Frankly, I was a humanitarian for a few years. There were a number of things that I tried my hand at.
And I think that's part of being an entrepreneur is you really want to try things out, right? Because you always have multiple ideas that are kind of swirling in your head. You're not sure what's going to work, so just try as much as you can. See which one works. So it's amazing that you actually had a chance to do that and have a successful exit. Go try some other things out. Go back to starting another company. Now, when it comes to the second company, you talked about the .com bubble and everything that kind of came crashing down in 2000 2001. I'm sure for any entrepreneur during that time, that was probably one of the roughest times, and it unfortunately had a couple similar events since. What kept you going? Why? What brought you back to saying, you know what, I want to keep doing this. I want to, keep pushing the company forward, despite losing millions, despite having, a net loss, in operations. What kept you going even through all those troubles? Why not just say, I'm done, I'm not being an entrepreneur again?
So yeah, and for a while I said, okay, let me try my hand in other fields. But I kept coming back to technology, partially just because I did have some significant success financially in my first company, and I needed to, I could let the money sit in the stock market, but I felt like so passive about that. I just didn't feel like that was a good place for money to necessarily be. And I did put some big bets on a few good companies, which ended up working out well, but in the stock market. But mostly what I did is I deployed more of my capital into other startups. And so that was what sort of kept my finger in the pie of technology. And then with the success of those investments, I'd get with all the body of investments, I'd have like a 6x sort of return or a 10x over sort of a 5 or 10 year period with the funds that I had. And so that sort of said, oh, wow, you're pretty good at, I was pretty lucky or good or whatever at investing. And so that kept me in the game. And then with those increased level of assets, I was able to say, hey, I'll do another startup. And it really, in the end, it was probably my lack of success as a musician or as a filmmaker or as a humanitarian. Not to say I wasn't successful in those fields, but I didn't really feel like the humanitarian organization that I started in a couple of year period grew up to 3,500 people. And it really did some important work in an area where work needed to be done. I won't go into the story in any detail, but at the end of it, I actually looked back on my life and the contribution I was making to society and to the world. And by far, the technological sort of innovations that I had helped bring to market, or either through my own inventions or through the companies that I led or through other companies that I backed, those were making a much bigger impact on the world than my efforts in music. We charted on 80 radio. No, actually it was 140 radio stations. We were top 40 on 80 or something. But in the United States, that's nothing. And then in filmmaking, I got some awards and things like that. But I wasn't I had to actually do something that I thought would be a good role model for my kids. Because I ended up getting married, and I thought, geez, I have to actually go to work and actually do something meaningful and provide a good role model. And then I said, the area of greatest impact is in enabling these big shifts in technology and these mega trends that are just going to keep rolling. And I happen to, be fairly good at picking out mega trends that will, eventually happen. And sometimes I'm a couple of years early and I get squashed, and sometimes I'm right on time and wow, you get 100 or 1,000 to 1 return, and geez, it looks like really good. And you get the reason you get the 100 or 1,001 return in good part is because you're giving really good advice to founders who haven't done it before, and you're helping them go further and faster. And that is a very gratifying thing. I guess in the end, a venture capitalist is really just like teacher and well, I know a lot of venture capitalists wouldn't think that way. They're sort of, but I think of it more as an advisor and as a mentor and as a guide than as a, you're going to do this my way or else, you know, or whatever. It's not, for me, it's about giving back a bit in the same way that when I started my first company, there were some angel investors that joined my company board of directors, and they advised me and they spent an ungodly amount of time helping me out. And I was just like, I want to do that. And I want to do that at scale. And that's what created SOSV in the form that it exists today. We back about 150 new startups every year in various fields. And we have a lot of very talented general partners and the people that work at the accelerators that have built multinational, multi-million-dollar businesses in really deep tech areas like hardware, you know, robotics and Internet of Things and, you know, hardware as a service and all sorts of different, even consumer electronics, things like that, or in life sciences, which is another sort of area that IndieBio and the other life science programs that we created, we pioneered those accelerators. We're the first in the world to do those types of accelerators, and we still have, in many ways, a good leadership position in those areas, partially because we've invested tens of millions of dollars building the infrastructure that makes that, you know, it's very hard to, like with a software accelerator, sometimes you basically need some desks and some really bright, you know, engineers and some talent and some, you know, advice on how to pitch it, et cetera, and business model advice. But with hardware, you know, you need to sometimes you need really deep tech innovations. Okay, how are we going to make this nuclear magnetic resonance imaging product, you know, for 30 times cheaper than what is currently available? And how are we going to do that? Or how are we going to, you know, introduce a new capability in, you know, in the microbiome, you know, products that are going to change human health in some significant way for some population of 500 million people, you know, or whatever, you know, so like these are really big, some of the world's most pressing challenges. And that's extremely exciting to work in areas like that, you know, and I really think that VCs have just you know, it's a really great dream job if for the right sort of background where you can really help people, where you've been through it yourself, where you've, you know, where you can give them great advice. I don't know if you hear my son screaming in the background. Is that all right?
You're good.
Okay. But, you know, so it's really, you know, it's really a gratifying area to work in. And, you know, everybody at early stage venture, it's not so much about the money. You will make money eventually, but it takes so much, you have to delay your gratification so much because it takes so long to go from a 2-person, you know, 3-person sort of idea sort of phase all the way to, you know, a public company. I mean, it can be 10 years, you know, or longer. So it is a very long journey before you actually can actually capitalize on it. But for people who just want to be in the coalface and doing this kind of work, you know, it's just doing the work every day. And that's the fun part.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are few key points, you know, I kind of want to point out, which is about timing. You know, for entrepreneur, as much as the product is important, as much as the team is important, that timing and a little bit of luck goes a long way for any startup. So, you know, being able to determine, are you at the right time, at the right spot, is as big of a challenge for entrepreneurs as it is, you know, to have the right idea from the beginning.
And sometimes it's not there's loads of complications. It's you know, so you could have really good timing, but you could have a different distribution channel. You know, that happened to me once, you know, where we had a better product, different distribution channel, and our you know, our product was getting, you know, in the PC Magazine back when that was a thing, you know, was rating it as the #1 product by far, you know, 5 stars, blah, 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 and all these great relationships, et cetera. But the competing product chose a different channel, suddenly a couple of years later, they're worth $1 billion or whatever. And the other thing is sold for less than cost, and that is, so it's not just having a better product, even it's getting everything right. Your relationships, your sometimes, although I don't think co-marketing matters all that much. Sometimes marketing partnerships and things like that will help drive things. Some things, the level of financing you're able to get enables you to do things that others can't do. So it's there's a lot of arbitrary things that determine, we invested early, like in the 3D printing space before, like, say, MakerBot took off, totally. And I know the guys at MakerBot. Zach actually was one of the co-founders of MakerBot. The technical co-founder was actually help run Hacks for a few years in the early years of Hacks. But we were, it's a whole bunch of things that are required, right, to make the product really successful, and just having that magic, just really getting that magic right. So we often find that we had the idea, in so many areas, and yet somebody executed better, right? And it's all about, so the idea is nowhere near as important as the execution, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And it's actually a great segue into kind of what I want to talk about next, which is, and you already mentioned this, about SOSV, the accelerators, everything that came about. This fund started off pretty much as your personal fund. Is that correct? You start off as pretty much a super angel that then turned into, having pretty much, 24 amazing successes, which enabled you to kind of grow the team out, grow the fund out. And now, as you mentioned, about 150 companies a year. It's probably the most, or at least in the top 3 when it comes to being active investors.
Yeah, so some depending on how it's counted, because everybody has a different way of counting it. Like if you're counting who's doing the most companies per year, it's probably like YC, because they have like 200 companies per cohort or something. But then there's those companies that get to seed stage funding, and there we're probably, a lot of times we're ranked number 1 or sometimes number 2, because even though we accelerate a smaller number of companies, maybe more of them are making it through to seed and Series A funding. And so we get a lot of companies. We're sometimes ranked in early stage. I mean, it just depends, like, on what quarter as well. Honestly, these things are up and down. We never actually set out to be the most active investor, but it's cool that we are the most active investor in the areas that we really specialize in. In life sciences, we're by far and away the number 1 most active investor, and in hardware and robotics and IoT, actually all those sort of subcategories, we're also the most active investor through the Hacks program and through the IndieBio programs, our 2 sort of flagship investment programs.
So talk to us a little bit more about those more specified programs. I know that, YC doesn't have like tracks, and a lot of the accelerators don't really have tracks. They just have companies come in, they'll try to find mentors or advisors that they're able to help them. What inspired you to create specific accelerator programs, especially for something like life sciences? I mean, there, as you mentioned, you were one of the first, or the first.
We were the first, and also the second, one to do that. We had in Europe, we had a program which was later called Rebel Bio, and then we had IndieBio in San Francisco. We've sort of merged it under one brand now, IndieBio. But so what, like we I'm always interested in doing things that haven't been done before, and it's just sort of a cop out, because it's much easier to be number 1 at something if you define what that what that thing is. So I mean, it's like, hey, HP didn't say, hey, we're going to be the number 1 printer company, because Epson, I think, or somebody was printing dot matrix printers or something that was probably the number 1 printer. They said, we're going to be the number 1 laser printer company or whatever, and then blah, blah, blah. So like, and then you create that segment and it matters. And then it becomes a really area that's worth defending. So we went after, an area nobody else had gone after, and so we could be known for our specialization. And anyone, it's just like, if you you want to be a doctor, you may try to get into Johns Hopkins, right? That would be a great place to go if you want to be a doctor. Or if you want to be, an engineer, maybe you would go to a Yale or a Princeton. They're good schools. They have good engineering schools probably, but you don't think that. You think, okay, let's go where all the engineering folks, the best engineering folks go. You go to MIT, you go to a specialized, Stanford or, Carnegie Mellon, RPI, or whatever. So like, if you really know what you want to do, then you're going to go where you can get the most direct advice that is going to be straight on target, rather than this general purpose sort of, this is what a pitch deck looks like. And, this is how you do marketing. Well, actually, how you do marketing for a hardware product and how you do distribution and how you finance the company is completely different and life science is the same. The investor set is also different. The people who are more likely to invest in those areas are different people because they have different levels of expertise. Now, we try to create a big tent so that IT investors can come in and invest in IndieBio companies. And that thankfully, and in HAX companies. And that's been working, and they've been seeing great results. And I think more people want to do that, so trying to create that big tent, but you're starting from a place where you have a niche, really well-known niche, and then you can focus directly on the most critical people to be your advisors in those areas. So, we have, we're so lucky to be able to have George Church as an adjunct partner at IndieBio, and to have, several famous, like, I have a next door neighbor who was the chief medical officer for Celgene. And so he's, an adjunct partner at our New York pharmaceutical, focused program. So like these are just things you would go after if you're really targeting an area, right? And then when you talk to the startups, those are the people they want to be advised by, right? So that's why you go vertical, right? Just because you're going to learn the most. And also, I mean, there's other things too. We can afford to invest more into those companies. So we invest twice as much money, at least, into the startups as the other traditional accelerators do. Like a traditional accelerator started out investing $20,000 and then $50,000. A lot of people still invest $50,000. And then 120 seems to be sort of a good rate that many of the top tier companies invest. Well, we in IndieBio and in HAX, we're investing 250. And this cohort at IndieBio is going to be, we haven't nailed it down yet, but it's going to be the cohort starts in February, and we're going to be making between $450,000 and $500,000 investments in each of the 20 companies that start next month. Wow. So it's just making it available to people. They don't have to take it if they don't want to take it, because it is a note, and it would convert at their, as they get financed.
And which is important because when it comes to life sciences, these are very capital intense industries going after diagnostics, medical devices, or especially therapeutics. That they're going to need a significant amount of an upfront capital, which not a lot of investors are willing to do, especially if they're not used to being in that industry. So if you go to OrbiMed or some of the bigger VC funds specialized in that space, they're fine putting in 10, 15 million, but they're not willing to put in 500,000 in a very early stage company. So
and when they put in the 10 to 15 million, you have to also mention they also take 85% of the company. So and so that's the model. I understand how it works. I understand why it works that way. I understand why they do it. I respect them, and actually we even do some deals with them. Although we try to get have the founder own a larger portion of the company post where we get the companies to. So but most of our, even in the pharma space, we will go up to $2 million, with a pharma, a small molecule therapeutic style thing with milestones. And of course we'll take some greater equity, but that to a lot of scientists, they just want the surety that they're not going to end up with a bridge to nowhere, like the 250 or whatever, or $120,000 they would get with an accelerator program takes them to a place where actually they haven't done their testing in live, in animals, the murine model, the mouse model testing, or whatever else they need to do in order to hit that, IND or whatever that creates that value inflection point, so they can then raise a $6 million or $12 million or $20 million round. So we try. Yeah, there's a no man's land, exactly.
Right. Excellent. Now, Sean, let's talk about just shifting focus a little bit. Obviously, you've been heavily involved in the life sciences, kind of looking at IndieBio and many of the amazing investments you made there. But then you have this, peripheral interest in certain diseases like autism. Would love to kind of understand, you're currently creating this fund to go after this very highly unmet need, highly misunderstood, need, and looking at a way to pretty much say, let's go after it and let's hit it like we've done with something like cancer or some of the other diseases where, 50 years ago it looked like there was no hope, and now there's been an amazing jump in therapeutics and diagnostics and making it better for those type of patients. What is the focus for this particular fund? What do you want to do with this fund, and why now?
Yeah, well, so just to be clear, SOSV runs, we run our core funds that support the companies that come through our accelerators and at the later stages. Mm-hmm. The fund you're talking about is more of a passion project for me, and it's something I don't do in my day job, and it's also something that I'm effectively just a co-creator of and a funder of, even though I don't have any special economic interest in it. I'm just like an LP, a backing LP, as well as sort of helping organize the what we've done is we've pulled together some great GPs and pulled together a core fund that they're raising $100 million fund for the Autism Impact Fund. And so that is the reason I'm doing this is because, the reason I got into life sciences in general is that it's the importance of the field, right? I mean, everybody is affected by this. If you do an app, whether it's a social media app, call it Parlor or something like that, maybe you'll make money. Maybe it's you get great growth and everything like that. But at the end of the day, it's about advertising and it's about, blah, blah, blah. Have you really changed the world in any significant way? Have you really improved anyone's quality of life? I'm not saying that there aren't. There are loads of great companies that are just about software and websites that, e-commerce companies that really are actually making a big difference and making more products available to people in different ways. But happy, and we do some of that more often in Asia than we do in the US. But the life sciences, it gives you a chance to do something really meaningful. Like you're talking about saving millions of lives, and how, by, one of our companies created the first artificial kidney, right? So it's still but that's how many people I think it's 1 million people a year die waiting for a kidney to be made available. And they have in the interim, in the 7 years that they're waiting to die, they're on dialysis, which is like this torture, an extremely expensive torture mechanism. And, it takes the life out of you. You can't, it's hard, with it, it's hard to maintain any sort of a quality of life while you're on it or keep a job or anything like that. So this is a tough problem that's affecting a lot of people's lives, and that's one area. And then of course you've got things like autism, and autism is how many tens of millions of people around the world have severe autism where they can't even speak. My son is one of them, right? He's 13 years old. I would love to be able to have a conversation with my son. These are, I had a friend who died of, what's the kind of brain cancer?
Glioblastoma?
Yeah, glioblastoma. Yeah. So, about 2 years ago, and I was just sitting with him a month or so before he died, and he was still having completely lucid conversations, et cetera. But it was just ridiculous that we can't do more, to save people. And these are treatable problems. And even if you can't solve everything, you can at least improve the quality of life along the way. And most of the times I do believe that these are solvable problems. And I know you probably feel the same way with your biology background. So looking at, improving these things, there's so many things that can be done on both a diagnostic perspective for autism. We have a diagnostics company that can identify kids at 6 months of age, a year and a half or 2 years before they would even be diagnosed, just by looking at the metabolites, the presence of certain analytes or metabolites in the blood at certain levels, the presence or non-presence, in 95, 97% will predict whether or not they actually end up, with autism. So can you do something at that point? Once you have a good diagnostic, it leads to good therapeutics. And so then how do you, what do you have to do to change the balance of, or understand? Right now, there's not a mechanism of action that's understood for autism. Is it immune? Is it is it an autoimmune disease of some kind? Is it a metabolic thing? Is it mitochondrial function? Is it a combination of a whole bunch of things? Is it mostly related to the gut biome? Lots of indications indicate that all these things are interrelated, right? 70% of your immune system is in your gut. All these things are interrelated, and we don't have a really good understanding, but there's so many promising avenues that need to be pursued. So when you have a problem, which is, $250 billion size this year, in terms of the autism area, in terms of the needs in that market, it's worth going after with a portfolio approach and really trying to provide a range of services, some which are not biomedical, some which are really just looking at quality of life or education or post youth, the 21-year-old sort of like, what do you do when the parents pass away and you have somebody who's severely autistic? How does society provide for, in an effective way, better outcomes for the quality of life of everyone involved?
Right.
So I believe that autism will eventually be a solved metabolic issue, just like other autoimmune diseases, and other types of conditions. Whether or not that'll help the people that have suffered from it and have suffered from it for decades in terms of their brain development and things, I don't know. But I do believe that it's imperative, with the urgency of which this is accelerating, the prevalence of autism in particular. It was 1 in 500 20 years ago, and it's I think in New Jersey, where I live, it's 1 in 34 kids. Right now, it's 1 in 54 throughout the whole United States. And so this is not a genetics are not driving this, because you can't have that kind of genetic change in that short period of time. It would take hundreds of thousands of years for that kind of thing to emerge. So it's something, combination with genetic tendencies maybe, but environmental, and other things that are going on. And if we can create it so fast, I think we can do something to put it aside, as well. I think there's things we'll be able to do. We don't understand. I could list 10 different ideas, but there's 30 or 40 different great researchers that just need to go further, faster. And that's what having a venture fund that's specializing in that need area is about.
No, and having someone very close to me that has ASD, it's very important for me as well. So which is why I'm so inclined and so interested in this particular fund and what you're trying to achieve, which I think is amazing. And we've been able to do that and been able to prove that we could do something amazing like this through this pandemic. When we, it's impossible 20 years ago to think that we can create a vaccine of a virus that just came out in a pandemic.
Right.
Within a year, we have a vaccine that I can actually start treating them that quickly. And so
I think focus, focus and effort enable change and transformation. And we can do this. This is a solvable issue. It may feel like it's completely unsolvable, like cancer. Cancer has gotten a lot better. It's still a far way away. Still the efficacy of various treatments. Like you have these immunotherapeutic treatments that are sometimes spectacular, like maybe 30% of the time or 25% of the time, completely cure somebody with a particular thing. And then you're like, oh, geez, why doesn't that work on the other 75% of people? And so we had to there's some things that need to be figured out, but it will be figured out. All this stuff is going to be figured out in the next, couple of, 10 years. And maybe I'm being overly optimistic. But
even as entrepreneurs, you have to be.
but here, the strange thing, of course, about being a venture capitalist is you can be right 1 time out of 10 and still be considered a genius, right? This is the one field where you can be mostly whiffing at balls and still be like, oh wow, look what came of that. A $1 trillion outcome, creates a lot of winners in the LP base and in the even if many of them maybe many of the companies don't make it that far, and frankly more of the companies do make it pretty far. So there's a lot of hope in terms of what people are doing and what's possible. This is the age. This is the absolute right age for life sciences investing, and also connected computing investing for digital devices and all of the things that those enable. That's why Hacks and IndieBio are so critical to the core of what we do. We do other things very well as well, and some of our best returning companies come out of our other programs. But those are mega trends that I think are unstoppable mega trends.
Yeah, and I think just looking at the past 20 years, we're moving towards that personalized medicine type approach. And one of the things we say, at least within families that are dealing with autistic individuals, is that when you see one individual with autism, you've only seen one individual with autism, because every single person, every single individual has such different symptoms, have very different ways that it's expressing itself. And so when we're going after that, individualized treatments and creating one drug for that one patient, I think has come out already in things like cancer. But I think if we're able to focus and provide that effort, I think, I don't see any reason why we cannot do that for autism, and then move that into every other disease, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. Yeah. There's so many other, potentially large unmet needs that just don't have the focus that, I think you're bringing to the table with autism.
Well, I totally agree with that. And I hope that we can also do that in a far more affordable way than the cancer treatments. Those are extraordinarily expensive, and there are other approaches that could be much more affordable for society, and we're rooting for some of those. I agree that personalized medicine is necessary, but it's also surprising that even though, as you say, autism, you see one child with autism, you see one child with autism, they all have different phenotypes, they all have different ways of presenting their symptoms. That's true, but it's also interesting that we have now a diagnostic that can still, with one blood test, looking at 6 analytes and metabolites and the presence or non-presence, just that can predict 95% plus of. So there is actually some underlying, similarity, and it could be that it just it's just like if you have a unicycle, there's 100 different kind of ways that unicycle can crash, especially if it's being driven by a driver like me who doesn't know how to do it. So that's what I think autism could be like. It could be because you enter into a fundamentally unstable state that, in some people ends up with them not being able to speak, and other people ends up with them having, and a lot of these are comorbidities, where they have GI problems and they have, motor control issues, and they have stimming, and they have all these other things. But so if there is, like I think a fundamentally unstable nature to it can witness itself in a whole bunch of different phenotypes. And that is, I think, possibly, there are some approaches that will just work, I hope, and I could be dead wrong on this, but it will work broadly against a lot of indications, a lot of different phenotypes.
Anytime we can do that thing right now is really that time where we can really expand and take one idea and really start applying to multiple different diseases, indications, individuals, and make sure it works for all of them, at least effectively.
And I think it also goes beyond autism as well, because some of these same problems manifest themselves in Crohn's disease or in other types of autoimmune diseases of various other types. And it's just so little is truly understood. We're just looking at parts of the elephant right now, but we can improve certain parts of the elephant just by treating those parts. And that can make a 10 or 20 or 30% difference. And we're looking at some amazing therapies, like the microbiota transfer therapy and whatnot that are in trials right now, and extraordinarily exciting possibilities there of big changes, more than a 10 or 20% improvement, way more, and more uniformly against a broader spectrum of people than one would have imagined. So life science is an extraordinarily impactful way to spend your life trying to make a difference. My mom died of Alzheimer's. I have friends that are dying off. I'm only 56 years old. I'm not, this is going to get a lot worse. A lot more people are going to be dying off in another 10 years, but in terms of my age group. But it's horrifying to see people who still have so much to give and contribute to society being taken from us. And it's just not. We have to be able to respond to this. And I think it's an important and vital area. And I think people are excited by it. I think people are interested in investing in those areas. They just need to be able to get a good return to keep it going and keep the money flowing and everything else. So that's part of the challenge.
Absolutely. We're coming towards the end of our time. So Sean, thanks so much for your time. Before I let you go, any parting words for entrepreneurs? What should they focus on? What can they do to become, successful? Their first endeavor, second endeavor, whatever it might be. Any parting word for them, as they move forward?
One general thing is go after problems that matter, right? Don't, choose to work on areas that you'll be proud of, and at the end of your life, you'll look back at the 10 years you frickin' burned your ass off and didn't earn any money, and maybe you didn't even succeed, but you'll be able to look back at it with pride because you advanced state of the art and it moved it forward. But I believe that all those lessons, make the world a better place, and the odds of you being able to actually succeed by just working on problems that matter are just as good as the odds of working on a problem that doesn't matter. So choose things that really, really, that you care about and will get you excited, that is not just sort of a money play. I've seen too many investors looking at a thing and saying, oh, this is a good business model, I can see how this will work. Not particularly interested in it, but I can make money at it, blah, blah, blah. Bad idea. It is and also not having a mission aligned North Star team that's focused on something that really matters. You'll end up with a lot of ho-hummer sort of colleagues in your startup. You don't want that. You want, people who are just as dedicated to you as you to a cause that really matters. So I'd say that that's super important. I'd say that go for differentiation, in your products. So go for things where you are the first of something, where you're not a me too, where you are cutting new ground, and where the size of the problem that's being solved is significant enough to move society forward. And then generally, the money will figure itself out. I say that sounds really Pollyanna, but if you actually are doing something really important, the money will find you. That may sound like a really like what are these new age people? I'm not like that way. I'm actually like, the money will find you because other people are passionately interested in that area as well. And there's a need, a solid need. And if you can deliver that need in stages by carving off an approachable, Mahesh, you've built successful business, finding customers at one stage that enables you to create the first sort of traction, which enables you to either raise capital or bootstrap. Like my first business was mostly bootstrap. So like that enables you immense freedom. So, and then I would add that as the last thing is try to get to revenues as soon as possible. I realize that's difficult in a lot of the life sciences areas, but get to revenues, get to traction, get to proof points immediately, and then everything. As many people say, sales solves everything. If you have something that people are buying, investors will line up. And your team will line up to deliver that thing that people want to buy and to fix it when it's not working. So everything moves faster when you engage with the marketplace.
Absolutely. Sean, I know you and I can probably talk for hours, but I know your time is also very valuable. So I really appreciate you spending this hour with us and, imparting your wisdom on everything that you've learned, talking about many of the endeavors that you have pursued, are currently pursuing, and really appreciate you joining us. And I'm sure everyone in the audience is really excited and appreciate the time you provided here.
It's my pleasure, and keep funding great startups, Mahesh, and all the luck to you and to Newchip going forward. Thanks.
Thank you so much.